Hello and welcome to Nexus Extra. This week we've been focusing on the overturning of Roe v. Wade, but another big story not to be missed was the sentencing of Ghislaine Maxwell, who received 20 years for recruiting and sex trafficking for Jeffrey Epstein between 1994 and 2004. She was also fined $750,000. We can now speak to Spencer Kuvin, a lawyer who represented 9 of Epstein's alleged victims in the early 2000s, one being the first to go to the police in Palm Beach, Florida. Spencer, welcome to the program. Let me start by asking you, what do you make of the 20 years? Of course, her lawyers were begging for a reduced sentence based on her age and so on, but she herself gave a statement in court trying to get sympathy. But what do you think of the 20 years? Is that fair?
Well, I can tell you that my clients were happy that the judge took the matter very seriously and sentenced her to the near maximum sentence that was available at the time. All of my clients believe that Miss Maxwell is just as culpable as Jeffrey Epstein, because without Ghislaine Maxwell, there would have been no Jeffrey Epstein. She was an integral part of the operation in recruiting a number of my clients and bringing them over to the home and training them in what Mr. Epstein liked.
I think we've heard that from Virginia Giuffre, haven't we, in her statement? She said, I want to be clear about one thing. Without question, Jeffrey Epstein was a terrible paedophile, but I never would have met Jeffrey Epstein if it were not for you, referring to Ghislaine Maxwell, noting that she was between the ages of 16 and 19 when she suffered at the hands of Maxwell and Epstein. Continue the quotation from Giuffre. For me and for so many others, you opened the door to hell. That's what your clients told you as well.
That's very true. Ghislaine Maxwell was really the hunter for Jeffrey Epstein. While Jeffrey Epstein was clearly the pedophile that was abusing these young girls, Ghislaine Maxwell would go out and hunt for victims that she could bring back to the home and give and turn over to Jeffrey Epstein. It was truly just a heinous operation that was organized, planned, and the training really took place through Miss Maxwell. Let
me read out a part of the statement that Ghislaine Maxwell gave to the court, and especially she was addressing the victims. She said, I believe Jeffrey Epstein fooled all of those in his orbit. His victims considered him a mentor, friend, or lover. Kind of makes you think that she's trying to call herself a victim there. She goes on to say, Jeffrey Epstein should have stood before you in 2005, 2009, and again in 2019. But today, it is for me to be sentenced. Now, in that statement, she seems to be saying, I'm a victim like you. And the fact is, I'm taking the fall here for an evil man who should have been tried and convicted multiple times before this.
Yeah, Ghislaine Maxwell was far from a victim in this operation. She was an integral part of the planning. She was an integral part of the recruiting of these young girls. She was definitely not a victim. But I would say I agree with the second half of her statement, which is that Epstein should have been before the court and should have stood trial. And it's unfortunate that the government allowed him to escape all of these years and then ultimately allow him to die in prison.
Let me bring you a little more of her statement. I am sorry for the pain you have experienced. I hope my conviction and harsh incarceration brings you peace and finality. I hope this date brings a terrible chapter to the end. Do your victims believe her when she says that sort of thing?
No, but it does bring some amount of closure to the victims that were abused by Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. You know, finally seeing one of the perpetrators involved in this operation stand justice and actually get put behind bars after so many years of seeing the Justice Department fail these young girls. There is a certain amount of success and closure involved in this final sentencing of Miss Maxwell.
She's around 60 years of age. If she serves her full sentence, she'll come out around 80. Do you think she will serve her full sentence?
Yes, under the federal system here in the U.S., we have a very strict policy of making people convicted in the federal justice system for their full term. Now, she will get credit for 2 years of time served while her trial was awaiting, so she could get 2 years at least shaved off of her sentence. And she may get maybe another year shaved off for good behavior, but she will definitely be behind bars until her late 70s.
You were involved in the original case against Jeffrey Epstein, as we heard. You represented 9 of his alleged victims. Can you just explain why that case was such a mess, why there was so much interference, why Epstein got off so lightly, and if you suspect there are bigger and darker forces protecting him and maybe Maxwell.
Well, I definitely think that the story of the original prosecution was one of power and money and influence. We saw as lawyers prosecuting these cases in the beginning that there was a huge hill to climb when trying to get justice for these young girls who at the time ranged in age from 14 to 17 years old. There was constant pushback from the federal government, the state government, and there were a number of people that were astounded during this investigation. This includes FBI agents, police officers that I had talked to, just absolutely baffled at why this man was not being prosecuted when they had over 50 young victims that the FBI had investigated that he had done this to. The only thing we could come up with was that the federal government either was afraid to prosecute this man or just for some reason, undeniable reason, chose not to prosecute him and give him the sweetheart deal that they did at the time.
So many people are speculating online why he had such an easy time of it through the judicial system. Do you have any secretly held, perhaps somewhat embarrassing ideas that you want to air here today about who was protecting him?
I mean, I can tell you that at the time of this prosecution that there were a number of players involved. Mr. Acosta was one of the prosecutors for the U.S. government at the time that negotiated this deal. It was a backroom deal that was done through emails and lunches and discussions with Mr. Epstein's lawyers. There was immunity given to people that should have never been given. The only thing that we could come up with at the time as lawyers for these victims was that potentially Mr. Epstein was giving the federal government here in the U.S. some kind of information that they could use, or that he was some type of confidential informant on other persons or other governments. That was the only rational explanation we could get as far as why they would give him such a deal.
That's right. And so then, was it a surprise to you that Ghislaine Maxwell made it all the way to trial and was convicted and sentenced? Were you surprised by that?
I was actually waiting for the federal government to step forward and say that they wanted to recommend a lighter sentence because she had given them information. And, you know, look, that doesn't mean that she may still not continue to cooperate with the federal government to get a reduced sentence on the back end of this. You know, she may be giving information to the federals now to prosecute other individuals. And it's our hope that she does, because there are many others that were involved in this conspiracy, people that Ghislaine Maxwell trained that also recruited young victims.
Spencer Kuvin, thank you so much for being on Nexus Extra today. Much appreciated. And thank you at home and on your phones for watching. If you want to see this or any of our other episodes, especially on the Jeffrey Epstein scandal and the Ghislaine Maxwell scandal, you can go to our channel on YouTube. Just type in Nexus TRT World. Well, thanks for watching. And remember, if you want to get alerted to all of our content online, do push the subscribe button and the thumbs up button. Thanks again.